story. If you can't run a whorehouse and make money, you are retarded. You're a moron. You're too stupid to run a Dairy Queen, let alone a country. And this is why every American city run by Democrats is a hole, right? Third world crap hole. Here's some things I believe in, and then I'll get to the meat of my speech. First of all, I'm a term limit guy. I believe in term limits is one of the keys to saving America. Thank you. And I have a very specific idea. I want all politicians limited to 2 terms, 1 term in office and 1 term in prison. I knew about that. I'm the founder of AARP, Americans Against Rotten Politicians. And I consider myself a good friend of President Donald J. Trump. He's been a guest on my shows 16 times. I think that's got to be an all-time record. And thank you. And every time he's on my shows, everyone that sends me emails, my fans that send emails, they say it was like watching 2 buddies talking in a locker room. You know, it's not like an interview. It's like 2 brothers hanging out or 2 buddies on a golf course. So I have a special relationship with President Trump. I married my wife 75 years ago, and our honeymoon was at Mar-a-Lago. I've opened for many of his speeches. I can't tell you the amount of great things I've had in my 11 years since I met Donald Trump. So that's one thing I'm known for. The second thing I'm known for is being Barack Obama's college classmate, class of 1983 at Columbia University. And the interesting thing about that is I was, as you might imagine, I'm not exactly a shrinking violet, right? Or a big mouth. I call myself the loudest MAGA mouth in the United States of America. I'm not shy. When I went to Columbia, no one was liberal. Everyone was a communist. Literally, the whole school was communist. And I was a Reagan Republican in 1980. And it was an interesting experience, to say the least. So I knew everyone, and everyone knew me. Oh, there's that crazy Reagan Republican guy. There's that racist. There's that guy who hates gay people. There's that guy who hates Muslims. You know, the same thing they throw at you today. Nothing has really ever changed. Nothing. And you think, well, one thing has changed, Wayne. Now they hate us and want to kill us. They want to murder us. They want to assassinate Trump. No, even that hasn't really changed. Nothing is any different than 1980. I'll tell you a great story that proves that. In 1981, I'm sitting in the largest class at Columbia University, a political science class. I'll be so specific, you know it's true. Professor Esther Fuchs. And it's 300 students in a giant theater in the round with high ceilings like this one that echoes kind of like this one does a little bit, except more so. And all of a sudden, the door bursts open. It's 1983, and think what happened in 83. Reagan got shot. So the door bursts open, and because it echoes, everybody turned around. Guy blew through the door. Everyone turned around. And the guy yells out, it's a kid, one of our classmates. He says, "They've just assassinated Reagan. Reagan's dead." Now, of course, that is not what happened. Thank God Reagan lived. But he was so overly excited because he wanted to see Reagan dead. So he probably inferred in his mind Reagan was dead. So that's what he says. Reagan's dead. They've assassinated Reagan. Guess what the response to the class was? Standing ovation. Nothing's changed. They hated us and wanted us dead then. They hate us and want us dead now. Another observation, interesting for you from Columbia. So like I said, I knew everyone and everyone knew me. But nobody has ever met Barack Obama at Columbia. Nobody. Not teachers, not professors, not administrators, not students. No one. Barack Obama says he graduated on the same day as me, 1983, Columbia class of 83. No one I've ever met, not one classmate, ever knew him. I beat that they're all communists and they all donated to his campaign and they love him, but they all admit never saw him. And I asked, oh, does that make you a little suspicious? Something's wrong? No, it's a big school. Not a big school. Our class was, I think, 790 students. And Fox News, when he was running, I was on Fox News day and night saying, I'm his classmate. And the reason I was on day and night is I was on the Libertarian presidential ticket in 2008 running against Barack Obama. And so I'm on Fox News and they find me an interesting guest. and they have me on a lot. And I keep saying, when they keep asking me, what was he like in college? My answer was never saw him, never met him, never heard of him. Never even saw someone with a face that looked like him. So back about 15 years ago, I was a columnist for Glenn Beck's The Blaze. And I decided to do a little journalism. And I called up the lead historian in the history of Colombia, Professor Henry Graff, Graff. And he was still alive. I came to all his classes. I remember him well. And he remembered me the instant I phoned him. He said, Wayne Allen Root, you were the Libertarian vice presidential nominee. So this guy knew everything about anyone who ever graduated Columbia and went into politics. And you couldn't graduate Columbia without going to his class. It was an absolute must when you couldn't graduate, couldn't get your degree. So I said, was Obama ever in any of your classes? And he said, Wayne, I have doubts he was ever here. You can't graduate without being in my class. And nobody by that name has ever been in my classes. I said, well, he went by Barry Soetoro at various points. He checked. Nobody named Barry Soetoro was ever in any of his classes. So I didn't even know what to answer you if you say to me, wait, what does that mean? I could just tell you he's the Manchurian candidate. That I can tell you. He never went to Columbia. He wasn't there. My guess is he was a CIA invention. That's my guess. He was invented by the deep state and the CIA to be president of the United States one day, or a U.S. senator, hopefully president in their minds. And once he became president, his job was to hand the country over to the deep state and the DC swamp and the Chinese Communist Party, et cetera, et cetera. My only other guess, by the way, that makes sense, is that we had a sister school in the Soviet Union in Moscow. And they probably taught to be a good little communist there. That's my only other guess. But he is the Manchurian candidate, and I know his plan to destroy America. And it's going on to this day. And I guarantee you he's in charge. He was in charge for 4 years under Biden, and he's still in charge now, leading the communist color revolution. He's the guy. Now, he takes orders from people that are much smarter than him. Maybe it's George Soros. Maybe it's the Chinese Communist Party. But he's the guy tasked with carrying it out and coordinating it. And his plan was what we learned at Columbia. It was called Cloward Piven. Raise your hand if you know that name. Cloward Piven. See, most of you pretty educated. You know that name. There were two Columbia professors, a husband and wife, and their names were Cloward and Piven. And they came up with a plan. How do you turn America into a socialist/communist nation? You get everyone in the country on welfare and food stamps and 1,000 other government programs, and there's not enough people working to pay the bills, and the economy collapses. You overwhelm the system, and next thing you know, even the richest white guys are on their knees begging government to save them, like the bailouts, like the COVID money, and America becomes a socialist/communist nation and basically a welfare state. So they spent the next 40 years after I graduated Columbia with Cloward Piven trying to make America a communist socialist welfare state. And they couldn't do it because the average American-born American, and the average legal immigrant, because legal immigrants are wonderful people, right? They come here to make money. They come here to work. They come here to make money. As opposed to illegal immigrants. Whole different ballgame. You'll never find a person in the world who's more anti-illegal immigration than Wayne Allen Root, okay? But legal immigrants are good for America. So legal immigrants didn't want welfare. American citizens born here, for the most part, the middle class doesn't want welfare. My parents taught me, SOB. My dad, the butcher, taught me, if you ever take a check from government, you're a piece of crap, okay? Learned that from the first day I was born. You never ever take money from government other than a student loan for college that you pay back. Other than Social Security, which is your money in the first place that they're paying back to you. Other than that, never take a check from government or you're a lazy bum. My dad taught me that. So Obama's plan became updated. Cloward Piven morphed into Open the borders. If we can't convince everyone in America to take welfare and overwhelm the system and collapse the economy, then let's bring in the rest of the world who has no problem taking welfare and food stamps and disability when they're not disabled and Medicaid and Obamacare. And they will do the job of destroying the country, bankrupting the country, overwhelming the system, and collapsing the economy. That was the plan. And it's going on as we speak right now, right? It's better under Trump, but it's still happening. So, look, my show is known as America's Top 10 Countdown. And I'm going to count you down now with some of the biggest stories in the news last week and this week that most people don't hear unless they're watching my show. You don't hear it in the mainstream media. You don't hear it in the mainstream media. I try to find stories that just aren't out there. So let me start with one story that I think is kind of interesting and funny at the same time, and horrible and tragic at the same time. If you go by the media, the Iran war is terrible. The Iran war is deadly. The Iran war is awful. 13 Americans have been killed in the Iran war. And by the way, there's no number that's acceptable. Don't let anyone think I'm making light of 13 families that have lost young men or young women fighting for America, because that's terrible. But in an entire war, we've lost 13 military heroes. Last weekend, 31 people were shot in Chicago. I think 5 of them died. The week before, same numbers. The week before, same numbers. The media doesn't say a word. It's 100% black on black crime in the streets of Chicago, almost all involving drugs. And the media says nothing. And that's one weekend. And it goes on in every city in the United States of America, every single day. And it's 1,000 times worse than Iran. And no one even notices because it's not in the media. So that's story number one. Now I'm going to talk about what I'm known for. I'm known for a guy who tells you that Trump achieves more in a week than any other president in 8 years, in 2 terms, including my hero, Ronald Reagan. Trump does more in a week than Reagan did in 8 years. So let me give you an idea of some of the things Trump did last week and tell me I'm wrong. I don't think anyone will ever be wrong. I come up with these every single week. But if you watch the media, not one of them is ever covered in the media, including Fox News, by the way. So we'll start with Trump signs a $70 billion bill to fund ICE and Border Patrol for the next 3 years and try and make America great again and the border secure again. President Trump drops a bombshell that accountability is coming for the 2020 rigged election. We know who rigged it. We have information no one thought was possible. And we have full files on the rigged 2020 election coming. Fingers crossed, right? How do you know the election's rigged? I tell the story all the time. If I was in a college class and the college professor said, I have an announcement class. I just instituted some rules that mean that it's almost impossible to ever again cheat on my exams. And 1/3 of the class took their desks and set them on fire, and took their chairs and threw them at the professor and said, "We're going to kill you." Wouldn't you think that third was cheating on their exams? That's what the Democrat Party does when we say voter ID and proof of citizenship. They're like a 5-year-old. I have 4 kids. My little kids would just bang their legs and jump on the ground and wriggle on the ground if I did something in life. That's what Democrats are every time you bring up voter ID and no more mail-in ballots and proof of citizenship. And we shouldn't count votes for 2 weeks beyond election night. And they freak out because they're cheating. You have to be a moron to not get that. Top Trump official says Democrats set up a system to funnel hundreds of billions of dollars, ultimately trillions of dollars, to migrants in the United States. Anybody hear that in the news? It's not in the news. DHS, Trump's DHS, directs ICE to deport illegal aliens who vote in American elections. Do you hear that in the news? Trump's DOJ launches the largest effort ever to denaturalize U.S. citizens that have committed crimes. In other words, if you've been naturalized, you're now a citizen, and you commit a crime that you were originally illegally in the country, you're gone. Do you get that in the news? No. Trump moves to squeeze illegal aliens out of the U.S. banking system with new executive order targeted banking loopholes and demanding that banks ask before you can open an account, do you have proof that you are a U.S. citizen? Good news. The DOJ brings on more than 80 immigration judges to expedite deportations. They're not moving fast enough. We all know that. Trump's trying every trick in the book to make it go faster. Homeland Security is drawing up plans to suspend international flights into American sanctuary cities until they stop protecting illegal aliens. Here's another one you don't hear in the news. Trump sent National Guard and FBI SWAT teams into Memphis. That's one of the cities where he sent the military in a months-long anti-crime operation. U.S. Marshals say they've arrested 10,000 criminals off the streets of Memphis. Do you hear that in the news? 10,000 gone. What would life be like if those 10,000 are still on the street? I'm guessing Memphis is still dangerous without those 10,000. Do you imagine with them? And you could do that in every city, but the judges won't let you. Insurrection, communist judges won't let you. Worst of the worst, latest ICE roundup nabbed murderers, rapists, kidnappers, drug traffickers, and human traffickers. This is what the Democrat Party fights for 24 hours a day. Trump administration eyes expansion of E-Verify for all federal grants. Great stuff. You don't hear about any of it. Trump's State Department cracking down on birth tourism. Right? You come to America, you have a baby, it's instantly American citizen. You go back to China for 18 years, and then you can send the child back and they're an American citizen forevermore. USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins confirms that a swath of blue states are upholding major SNAP fraud while red states comply. She says 200,000 dead people are getting food stamps, 500,000 double dipping in red state data alone. If we had Kamala as president, none of this would be happening. So you're upset, and I'm upset that more isn't happening, and that it's not happening faster, but it is happening. Acting AG Todd Blanche announces indictments of illegal aliens in a wide-ranging child smuggling conspiracy and says there are over 15,000 cases pending. This is illegal aliens raping, kidnapping, and raping and sexually assaulting little children. Left doesn't care. Democrats don't care. The media doesn't care. Do you care? Yeah. Trump warns the U.S. cannot live with birthright citizenship. But it's up to the Supreme Court. It's not up to us. Once again, judges. U.S. Postal Office proposes new rule on delivery mail ballots based on Trump's executive order, which, by the way, I'm not shy in saying, I came up with the idea, sent it to Trump, and he instituted it and signed the executive order. And the executive order says it requires states to provide voter information that the Postal Service will use to verify whether you're a U.S. citizen and you belong on the election list to have mail-in ballots. And now the U.S. Postal Service is proposing a new rule that states that do not comply will risk losing U.S. Postal Service delivery of mail ballots. Good news. The only question is, does it ever actually happen, or will an insurrectionist communist judge stop it from happening? Until Trump solves that problem, we're going to lose America because everything we do, there's a communist judge that was placed there, just like Obama was placed there to block Trump and destroy Trump and stop Trump. And that's the reason things are not moving as fast as they could. President Trump instructs Pulte, who's the acting DNI, Pulte, to fire deep state intelligence officials left over from Biden and Obama immediately. Who knew, right? The DOJ probes big banks for alleged debanking of clients for their conservative political beliefs. Has it happened to anyone in this room? Raise your hand. Were you debanked? I was. You were. It happens every day. I was attacked, by the way, unmercifully by Obama from 2010 to 2013. A 4-year IRS audit that was up my ass, excuse my language, like it was a proctology exam. Tried to destroy my life and wipe me off the face of the earth. This is what you're dealing with. Trump administration access ties to dozens of progressive groups in direct opposition to Trump policies. We're cutting off their money as fast as we can. Trump announces he's auditing, HHS is auditing all 50 states following shocking nationwide explosion in Medicaid, autism billing. They're just ripping off our money. Trump administration yanks funding from LA Homeless Agency amid explosive voter fraud probe. That's how they beat Spencer Pratt. Homeless people voted 10 times each. They were paid for their votes. The whole thing was a scam. And now just a couple of economic news bursts that you don't hear in the news. America first, economic nationalism at work. U.S. steel production rises as Trump tariffs reduce foreign imports by 30%. Gas prices fall for the 4th week in a row. Trump economy delivers for blue collar boom. Manufacturing wages soar. U.S. jobs soar by 172,000 in May, smashing estimates in a 4 sigma peak, which on Wall Street means almost an impossible achievement. Trump announces expansion of Trump RX with 600 new generic drugs at prices that you couldn't get before unless you went to Canada to get them. Trump eases EPA refrigerant regulations in a move aimed at lowering grocery prices. And U.S. Attorney in California says the voter fraud investigation will result in criminal charges. That's 1 week of Donald Trump as your president. 1 week. I'm out of breath just talking about it. How much time do I have? You know the time? Okay. So let me quickly run through a couple of other stories I think are important for you to know. I got so many in here, but I want to get to only the super most important. So do you know the name of an investigative journalist named Nick Shirley? Yes. He's great. Nick Shirley tracks down a California voter who is 126 years old. And he's voted in 51 elections. So hand in hand with that, California advances the controversial Stop Nick Shirley Act. If this is a real bill with a real name, Stop Nick Shirley, that says if you are a citizen investigative journalist and you are probing fraud in California, we can throw you in jail. It's incredible. Governor Newsom signs new election codes into law ahead of the statewide primaries. This was right before the primary, but you need to know this. And basically what this new law says is the federal government can almost under no possibility come into California and look at the voter rolls. Just like the teacher says you're not going to be able to cheat anymore. This is the reaction when you're cheating. New Jersey Republicans find hundreds of non-citizens on the voter rolls. It's eye-opening. Of course they are. Here in Nevada, we're one of 19 states that allows illegal aliens to get driver's licenses. Do you know what happens when you go to DMV to get a driver's license anywhere in the country? Not Nevada, anywhere. Motor voter law put into play by Bill Clinton says that if you get a driver's license, you're automatically registered to vote. So if illegals have a right to get a driver's license, and when they walk into DMV, they're automatically registered to vote, don't you think that they're voting? They're legally registered to vote now. Of course they're voting. That's how we lost Trump in Nevada in 2016. That's how we lost Trump in Nevada in 2020. And finally, in 2024, we won Nevada for Donald Trump. How did we do that? How did we do that? A lot of people ask me, they don't understand. How did you finally win the governor, the lieutenant governor, the controller, and Trump in Nevada? When we know that it's overwhelmingly illegal aliens voting by the hundreds of thousands in Nevada. And the answer is between 2016, when Trump lost here, and 2020, when Trump lost here, hundreds of thousands of Californians moved into Nevada. And they were not liberal Californians, they were Republicans running for their lives. That's what's making us conservative again. Nevada is becoming great again because it's becoming red again. Just like New Yorkers moved by the hundreds of thousands to Florida, and they turned Florida bright red. People don't get it. They weren't liberals running away from New York. They were conservative MAGA voters running away from a deep blue state. And it's happening in California. And they're all running to Nevada. Las Vegas gets 5,000 Californians a month. And they're not liberals. I'm telling you, we're going to win the races this November again because we're becoming a red state again. Here's the story you have to hear. California gets 80% of all the federal cash in America for illegal alien families. 80% in California. Let me tell you the scam. You need to know the scam. If you're an illegal, you cannot collect welfare, theoretically. But if you're an illegal and you have a child on American soil, now you can collect all the welfare, food stamps, Medicaid, and other government programs that you want. So they really are anchor babies. You have a baby and you're set for life. And 80% of it is in California. Now, I moved to California in 1989. And I'm not shy about admitting I was a bachelor. And I loved it. It was the greatest place in the world. The women were beautiful. The sun was out. The nightclubs were amazing. The restaurants were amazing. It was 70 degrees in the winter and 80 in the summer. It was the most amazing place in the world. The palm trees, unbelievable. Somehow Democrats have managed to even destroy California. It's the worst place in the world now because all my friends in California are wealthy guys. They're lawyers, they're doctors, they're investment bankers, they're business owners, and they've lived there their whole lives. And they have houses in Bel Air and Beverly Hills and Pac Palisades and Malibu, and they're rich. And they're all moving to Las Vegas. And when they get here, they all tell me the same thing. You can't even go out to eat without being followed home. And they're going to rob your house. They're going to rob your street. They're going to rob you in the street. They're going to carjack you. Home invasion. They say we can't wear our jewelry out inside a safety deposit box. And we have a Ferrari and a Rolls Royce in the garage. But we drive a 20-year-old jalopy to a restaurant so no one follows us home. We can't live in California anymore. And they're leaving. And they're moving to Texas and Florida and Tennessee and South Carolina. And right here in Las Vegas, where they can live a decent life and not be followed home and robbed. And I want to mention a couple of things. In 5 minutes? Okay. Did you see what happened in Belfast last week? An African migrant was sitting on a guy in the street and he was cutting his head off. Do you hear what I said? Cutting his head off in the middle of the street. This is the future of America if we don't get illegal immigration under control. It's a true disaster. Now, if you think that open borders is just about crime and welfare and stolen elections and healthcare, a disaster, right? I mean, same number as doctors. We haven't changed the number of doctors, but all of a sudden you have 30, 40 million new people.
Yep.
So you're waiting in line behind millions of illegal aliens, and your price has
I'll
exploded.
find them.
But it's more than all of that. Let me tell you what it is. Flesh-eating cattle screwer.
Yes.
They're gonna have to kill 8 million head of cattle. You think steaks cost a lot now? In Las Vegas, steaks are $100.
Not,
Do you know what they're gonna be when you kill 8 million head of cattle?
let me check.
Does anyone trust that this was not possibly a terrorist attack? Because you left the border open and people came in who hate America and want to destroy America and want China to win the economic war. How do you do that? Maybe you kill the cattle and no one can eat beef anymore. R.F. Kennedy Jr. responds to explosion in tick-borne alpha-gal syndrome. You know what that is? People are getting bit by ticks and they can never eat beef or chicken again. Can you believe that? For the rest of your life, you'll be alive and you'll want to commit suicide because you can never have a good meal ever again. It's incredible. So my question is again, do you know who brought the ticks in? Do we know that it wasn't because of the open border? Do you know it wasn't a terrorist attack on the American way of life? Last Friday, the Medline Medical Supply Warehouse in Tracy, California, burned to the ground. 1 million square feet that supplies every hospital in America with everything the hospitals need when you're sick, burned to the ground. Do you know that that was not a terrorist attack to destroy the American medical supply line? Do you know that wasn't a foreign terrorist attack? Do you know that that wasn't China? Deadly LA wildfires. The guy right now on trial in LA wanted revenge against society. And that's why he set the fire that burned down the entire Black Palisades and most of Malibu. I lived in Malibu for 13 years until I moved to Las Vegas. Both houses that I lived in have now burned to the ground. And people think, well, that's Mother Nature. That's a lightning strike. No, it's not. It's people that hate you and want to wipe you out because they're poor and you're a rich American. Do you know that these fires are not set by illegal immigrants? Of course you don't know that. So again and again, the problems in America come down to open borders, illegal immigration, Cloward Piven, and the great replacement so they can win elections. That's what's destroying America. And until we can beat that, until we can get that under control, we're not going to make America great again. But if Trump can find a way to beat the insurrectionist judges and accelerate the mass deportation, we can make America great again. And I trust in Trump. God bless you and thank you.
All right, folks. So the next speaker that we have up is Mitch Wexler, president and founder of Mockingbird Properties, who uncovered 5.1 trillion in bond fraud. Could go as high as 17 trillion. Very important speaker. Put your hands together for Mitch, ladies and gentlemen. Is everything okay on the switchboard? We're good?
Yeah.
Well, this roof is a very interesting act to follow. Two opposite characters getting to the exact same place. So
what you see here, we have an extension of this not right from the C. See, he was pounding on my keyboard. Okay. Beginning all that stuff. You're good on switchboard? Yeah. Okay. We're gonna start off back in 2019. As you can see on the left-hand side of these columns, the CPI is the Consumer Price Index. The home value, pick a number. Let's say it's 220,000 in 2019. According to the CPI, your value could legitimately be 272,000. That is not what happened. Your value went to 440,000. The delta between those two numbers is pure fraud. What you paid people in this room with a $220,000 home, what you paid in fraud, not the real tax number, the fraud component was $17,000. Let nobody say that this doesn't affect wealthier people as well.